Yesterday, some stunning new poll numbers showing huge majorities of Americans want the health care law repealed. And today, new figures from Gallup showing folks are just as unhappy about how this president is handling the economy and the deficit. According to Gallup, just 27% of Americans polled approve of the job the president is doing on the deficit. That's down from 32% in November. And just 37% approve of the job he is doing tackling the economy. So what does this mean for the president? Dan Gerstein is the president of Gotham Ghostwriters and a Democratic strategist. Dan, I thought that the healthcare polls from Rasmussen yesterday were pretty stunning, showing 58% of Americans want to see it repealed, 63% of independents. Then come these polls from Gallup, different organization, that say 56% of people don't approve of his health care policy, 65% of independents don't. 60% don't approve of how he's handling the economy, 68% of independents don't approve. 68% don't approve of the job he's doing on the deficit, 81% of independents don't approve of the job he's doing on the deficit. Those numbers politically pose a problem.
Absolutely, and I think you're seeing a hangover from the November elections. Even though the president has started to change his orientation and change his tone, hasn't had time to change his policies yet. And most importantly, the results haven't changed at all. And I think these poll numbers, you can parse them any way you want, are a reflection of the frustration the American people have with results, the lack of results, lacks of changes on unemployment numbers, lack of seriousness on both parties on the deficit. We're in the same place. Now, it's not necessarily realistic to expect that it's going to change overnight. But I think, again, as long as there's not progress, people don't see tangible progress, the numbers are going to continue to stay very low, and the president's got to do some work to earn back people's trust.
I think it's interesting what you said. He hasn't had time to change his policies. I think that you may have a point when it comes to the economy, because he has been suggesting more like lowering the corporate tax rate and more things that might stimulate job growth, but not so much on the deficit and not so much on health care. You know, he said he'll bargain a little bit on health care, but not really when it comes to the guts of the law. And when it comes to the deficit, you know, he said he wants to freeze spending where it is now, but everybody points out, well, we're already at hugely elevated levels of spending, so that's not really going to do it. So do you really foresee approval for him in these numbers between now and the time he runs for re-election?
Well, yes, because he'll have to. There's no way he can get re-elected if these numbers stay the way they are. I think what you're seeing right now is both sides are staking out their early bargaining positions because there's going to have to be a deal cut later this year on the budget. The president learned his lessons on the stimulus. They started in the center, and the Republicans didn't want to meet them, and they felt burned. I'm not making the value judgment on that. That's just their attitude. So they're starting out here.
Because liberals wanted the stimulus proposal from the White House to be twice as big as it was.
And less in the way of tax cuts. And the president early on said, no, I'm going to have tax cuts in there to try and buy Republican support. It didn't work. Here, I think what you're seeing is they learned that they're internalizing that lesson. They're going to start. Their opening bid is a spending freeze. The Republicans are saying, no, we got to have a lot more spending cuts. And what we're seeing is jockeying for position to see where the middle will be in the compromise they ultimately reach.
Here's what I don't get, and you tell me, maybe it's political naivete, right? Because the president, when he sat down with O'Reilly earlier this week, said the polls are evenly divided on health care. They're really not. They're not. And it wasn't just the Rasmussen polls. The RealClearPolitics.com average shows that all the polls show at least about a 7 or an 8 point spread against the law. Then he said that he was enthusiastic about cutting back the deficit. You know, in a State of the Union address, most people did not feel that way, and you can see the American public does not believe that he is tackling the deficit in a serious enough way. Is there a disconnect between what he believes and what the American people believe?
No, I don't. Well, let me say this. I think what you're seeing, again, this is political tactics. And if you're asking me my personal opinion, I think the president would be much better served being much more aggressive on cutting spending, reforming entitlements, changing the tax system, and basically calling the Republicans bluff, sort of saying, I'm going to be more aggressive on fiscal responsibility, but doing it in a smart way. The Republicans are taking a sledgehammer to spending in a very indiscriminate way, which could have all kinds of repercussions. The president could own this issue. I think he's made a decision. He wants to be much more cautious in baby steps. Well, because the politics, unfortunately, rewards caution. And you have to look at what happened in the Bush years. You know, we had the fiscal policy of this country in the 8 years of the Bush years was the Cheney doctrine. Deficits don't matter.
Yeah.
I think what we're seeing now is the public is sort of saying, in this environment, we can't have that. And I think the Obama modification to that is deficits don't matter that much right now. And I think you're going to see over time, though, he's going to have to come to the middle and cut a deal with the Republicans. But this is all negotiating tactics.
Well, listen, you don't have to worry, and the American people do not have to worry, because as I told you later, after those Republicans earlier, after they came out of their meeting with the president, Eric Cantor assures us that they discussed the need for all of us to send a serious message when it comes to cutting spending. We'll look forward to that message, not to actually do it, but to send a message saying we're looking at it.
But what we need is for them to get serious about entitlement reform, because the Republicans
They're not
talk about
going
just domestic spending all they want.
Earth to Dan.
We have no choice.
Neither side. Neither side.
Well, we'll see.
Okay. I'll make you a
have
bet
to.
on that one.
They have to.
Thank you, Dan Gerstein.
Okay.